This week isn't just big, it's game-changing. You won't believe what's coming.
Who are you?
Quartermain loyalists, brace yourselves. This casting could shake the family tree in ways no one saw coming. The latest casting speculation has stirred up the usual storm of wild theories, ranging from the mildly plausible to the gloriously absurd. The promo voiceover alone could win an Emmy for sheer melodrama, and now fans are bracing for the arrival of Erika Slezak. Cue the collective gasp. Of course, the most outlandish suggestion is that she's arriving as Victoria Lord, straight out of One Life to Live, as if Port Charles has decided to become a daytime multiverse. Entertaining, yes. Likely? Not in the slightest. More credible theories pin her character to the Quartermain orbit. Perhaps a connection to Monica, though the logic there is tenuous at best. Or maybe she's Lila's long-lost daughter, which would instantly make her Tracy's half-sister, an idea deliciously soapy and guaranteed to provide Tracy with fresh sparring material. Naturally, Martin Gray's shadow lingers in these speculations. If there's an unexpected twist, he's usually lurking nearby. And while the storyline doesn't need extra absurdity, one can't help but recall the fate of Faison's brain in a jar. If someone floated the idea that it ended up implanted in Nathan, would anyone dare call that too far-fetched for this show? Exactly. At the very least, Erika Slezak's arrival promises something the canvas desperately needs. A performer formidable enough to go toe-to-toe with Jane Elliott's Tracy. For that alone, the casting is already a win. Are you tired of General Hospital resurrecting more characters than a zombie apocalypse? Britt Westbourne has officially vaulted to the top of the Please Exit Stage Left list. Her ongoing delusion that Rocco is her son is exhausting, and every screeching reminder only makes one long for the days when she was off-screen, or better yet, presumed dead. The woman's petulance over Lulu's very reasonable boundaries is less maternal devotion and more toddler meltdown. Lulu is Rocco's mother. Period. No amount of foot-stomping or shrill repetition will change that fact. Meanwhile, General Hospital continues its favorite pastime, exhuming the dead. Nathan's miraculous reappearance, fingerprints and DNA conveniently confirming what soap logic already made obvious, has left viewers toggling between disbelief and déjà vu. Theories abound. Peter in disguise, Faison lurking in the shadows, or simply Nathan faking amnesia for dramatic flair. At this rate, why not resurrect Morgan, Nell, Sam, Helena, and anyone else collecting dust in the afterlife? Port Charles could use an overflow annex for the undead. Jane Elliott, however, rescues the spectacle from total absurdity. Her portrayal of Tracy Quartermain is masterful, wringing poignancy from a woman surrounded by loss. Yes, some question Tracy's overt grief for Monica. After decades of barbed insults and cold wars, their history hardly reads like soulmates. Still, Elliott sells it. A single staircase breakdown lands harder than a dozen overwrought monologues elsewhere. Elsewhere, Molly remembering to call him Uncle Sonny again was a nice reminder that Port Charles still has a sense of family, however dysfunctional. Gio and Emma's budding sweetness is a welcome reprieve, as is the slowly thawing ice between Gio and Brooklyn. For once, the younger set isn't just wallpaper. Not all returns are so welcome. Lucy Coe remains gratingly obsessed with her company, even as others mourn. Her inability to pause the self-promotion tour long enough to acknowledge human grief is nothing short of grotesque. One half expects Tracy to evict her outright, and frankly, the mansion would be quieter for it. Tracy herself remains an enigma, nostalgic one moment, authoritarian the next. She waxes poetic about Monica spending final moments with Scout and Wiley, then orders Willow banned from the grounds. The hypocrisy is textbook Tracy, though one wonders why a woman with allegedly endless funds insists on squatting in someone else's house. And then there are the wild fantasies. A Port Charles casino rising from the ashes of the Cassadine mansion, complete with secret tunnels, international investors, and Selena Wu running the tables. Toss in Stella, Martin, and a manufactured rivalry with Erika Slezak, and suddenly GH morphs into Vegas by the sea. Ridiculous? Absolutely. Entertaining? Without question. General Hospital thrives on excess, resurrections, betrayals, and characters who weep for enemies while disowning family. But as long as Jane Elliott is anchoring the madness with gravitas, and Britt is flailing around like a toddler denied candy, the circus remains open for business. They want you to believe Nathan might be Morgan, or a new guy. Here's why that's nonsense, and why the show is baiting us yet again. The week's episodes managed to cram in everything from shocking resurrections to inheritance squabbles, all while reminding viewers that consistency is apparently optional in Port Charles. Let's start with the most glaring absurdity: Lulu failing to recognize Nathan. Everyone else did. Friends, acquaintances, random passers-by. But Lulu, who knew him before her coma, suddenly draws a blank. This isn't selective memory, it's selective writing. And yes, that stretcher cameo looked suspiciously like Ryan Pavey. The whispers about him returning are delightful, but let's be clear, Nathan is Nathan. He's not Morgan, not some hastily invented new person, and the audience has already been tricked once with Britt's supposed twin. Pay attention to the breadcrumbs. The show practically spelled it out when Lucas, Anna, and Dante reacted in collective shock. Meanwhile, the nostalgia machine is working overtime. Viewers were reminded of Monica's unforgettable tropical fling with a cabana boy who, plot twist, turned out to be her nephew, Ned. Nothing says family bonding like an accidental incestuous vacation romance. Add to this the recent remembrances, heartbreaking tributes to Monica and Robert, with some viewers insisting Robert's loss felt even heavier, while others recalled Jesse Brewer with the kind of intimacy usually reserved for actual relatives. It's almost touching if you forget this is a soap opera that thrives on recycling grief. The inheritance vultures are circling as well. Monica's will is now the hottest topic in town, as if the woman's decades of medical heroics can be reduced to who inherits the mansion. Jason, Michael, a grandchild, or the popular fan fantasy, Tracy reclaiming the property as the rightful Quartermaine heiress. Of course, this assumes Tracy doesn't immediately evict the entire household for minor irritations, which, let's face it, sounds exactly like her. The possibility of Erika Slezak joining as Monica's sister only promises more delicious chaos. Imagine Tracy and Victoria Lord Buchanan under one roof. Sparks would fly, and not the romantic kind. Elsewhere, Christina took it upon herself to torch every bridge in sight. At the BBQ, she helpfully dragged Dante out of his brooding, then pivoted to accusing Willow of being a terrible mother. Willow's failure to slap her may have been either shock or sheer wisdom. Watching Christina's talent for escalating every interaction into a confrontation, one wonders how she hasn't been hired as Port Charles' official chaos agent. The show also left dangling threads. Scott's sudden disappearance remains unexplained. Was he abducted or just on an extended coffee run? And the AJ discourse refuses to die. Was he truly a disastrous father, unfit to raise Michael? Or was Carly's vendetta more complicated? Depending on who tells it, AJ was either irredeemable or simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. And yet, amidst the circus, there were genuine highlights. The scenes between Jason and Tracy stood out for their warmth and believability, a rare moment when the show chose tenderness over theatrics. Stella's performance similarly brought a gravity that reminded everyone this soap is capable of depth when it remembers to stop tripping over its own plot twists. The hope now is simple. Monica's memorial deserves dignity. No courtroom squabbles, no opportunistic feuds, just a graceful farewell to a character whose presence defined generations. But given the writer's track record, expect the will reading to ignite a war that makes all previous Quartermaine battles look quaint. After all, in Port Charles, grief is never just grief. It's always a prelude to the next spectacle. They worked for years to redeem Britt, and now the writers are destroying her in weeks. The latest standoff between Nina and Willow only sharpened the suspicion that Willow, not Drew, may have pulled the trigger. Nina certainly behaves as though she knows it. She's practically confessed as much to her aunt. And yet somehow, despite Willow's erratic behavior and new responsibilities with Scout, Drew manages to look more loathsome with every passing scene. If only Joss hadn't shot Cyrus. Perhaps then Cyrus would have handled Drew's hospital bed fate more efficiently, and now, the writers have thrown the audience back into familiar territory. Team Lulu versus Team Britt. Once upon a time, Lulu sparred with BLQ. Now she's recycling the exact same conflict with Britt. One would think General Hospital's writers could find more for intelligent women to do than rehash endless catfights over children. Britt's behavior makes the storyline especially absurd. An accomplished OBGYN ought to know better than to wage war over a child she carried as a surrogate but has no biological connection to. Instead, the show has reduced her to a shrill caricature, snapping at everyone, obsessing over Ben, and rewriting her own history in ways that defy both logic and memory. Britt once enjoyed a carefully earned redemption arc alongside Liesel, only for the writers to unravel it into cartoonish fixation. The result? Fans forced to choose between an entitled Lulu and an unhinged Britt, when the only sensible option is Team No One. Lulu, of course, comes with her own baggage. The character has always been written as Carly's spiritual mini-me, a role as grating now as it was during her teenage years. Yet in this round of feuding, Lulu is at least attempting to put Rocco's well-being first. She offers peace, reasonable stipulations included, while Britt explodes at the mere suggestion of boundaries. Liesel, interestingly, demonstrates more rationality than Britt herself by listening and eventually compromising. What makes the storyline even more frustrating is the blatant inconsistency. Britt never showed this level of obsession with Rocco before her death. To suddenly rewrite her as the surrogate-turned-possessive mother is not only implausible, but insulting to viewers' memory. Worse, it undermines years of narrative work that redeemed her character, much like the show once rehabilitated Franco only to destroy him in the end. The only entertainment value lies in Britt's sharp wit, which still eclipses Lulu's sanctimony on occasion. But beneath the surface, it's all smoke and mirrors, manufactured drama for the sake of giving Lulu someone to scream at. Even those who usually despise Lulu find themselves siding with her purely because Britt's behavior has been written into such grotesque parody. At the end of the day, Lulu is Rocco's mother. Britt was a surrogate, a criminal, and at times a comic relief villain, but never a legitimate parental figure. To pretend otherwise cheapens both characters and insults the audience. If the writers truly want a Team Britt versus Team Lulu dynamic, they'll need something stronger than reheated storylines and character assassination. Until then, the only reasonable team is Team Let's Not Do This Again. Here's what General Hospital doesn't want you to notice. Most of its current plots collapse the moment you apply basic logic. Returning to General Hospital after a decade away is a crash course in narrative absurdity. One moment, a viewer is delighted to see Dante, the once compelling cop son of Sunny, only to discover that the writers have spent the past year turning him into a whiny, volatile plot device. But Dante's degradation is hardly unique. In Port Charles, continuity is less a priority than a disposable inconvenience. Take Charlotte, for instance. She exists only because Helena Cassadine stole Lulu's egg and paired it with Valentine's sperm, thus producing a child who worships her morally dubious father with unnerving intensity. Lulu's ignorance of her own daughter's existence until much later was not enough. Claudette had to steal Charlotte before conveniently disappearing, possibly by Valentine's design. If that wasn't messy enough, the show recently dredged up an adolescent tryst between Dante and Brooklyn, which apparently produced Gio. Yes, Gio, the violin prodigy who just so happened to be raised by a conveniently placed cousin, unbeknownst to either parent. This is less storytelling than retroactive chaos dressed as character development. And then there is Rick Lansing, or rather, Rick Lansing's basement imprisonment. A once formidable character now exists in narrative purgatory, casually referenced as though being held captive indefinitely is simply a quirky subplot. Viewers are expected to overlook basic human realities: food, hygiene, muscle atrophy, because acknowledging them would break the fragile soap bubble. The indignity is compounded by the fact that Rick's captors include Alexis, who should be too seasoned and too ethical to participate in this nonsense. Instead of watching Rick struggle, strategize, and interact with his captors, the stuff actual drama is made of, the storyline is reduced to an off-screen gag. Of course, soap operas thrive on suspension of disbelief, but even melodrama has its limits. Other shows have managed to stage prolonged captivity with genuine tension. Here, Rick might as well be in witness protection, considering how rarely he is mentioned. The only reason the storyline exists, it seems, is to explain Rick Hurst's absence following the death of his mother. A legitimate real-world circumstance, yes, but the fictional handling could not feel lazier. General Hospital remains a showcase of talent wasted on illogical plots, continuity-shattering retcons, and half-baked storylines. Viewers return hoping to rediscover compelling character arcs, and instead find recycled deaths, miraculous resurrections, and children conceived in soap operatic laboratories of contrivance. At this point, one must wonder, is Port Charles written by storytellers or by a roulette wheel? Here's what they don't tell you about General Hospital. Death in Port Charles means absolutely nothing. If General Hospital insists on raiding the graveyard, then the least it could do is choose wisely. Not every ghost deserves a revival, but some characters would inject the kind of drama this show pretends to still deliver. Sam McCall tops the list. Killing her off was a spectacular miscalculation. She's a Cassadine. Those people practically come with a "do not resuscitate" exemption. Sam's children, especially Scout, are being written as though they've been permanently orphaned, when the truth is their mother should be here to fight for them. One can practically hear the custody battles now. Drew left fuming while Sam dismantles him in court. Her presence would also stir up Dante, who never truly got over her, and she'd complicate the already messy Quartermain household with Danny in residence. If Kelly Monaco won't return, then recast her. Lindsay Hartley proved she could carry the role. Port Charles needs Sam. Next, AJ Quartermain, the family's perennial punching bag. His return would be less about sentiment and more about unfinished business. Sonny pulled the trigger, Ava set the stage, and AJ never got to have his say. Michael adored him, and reviving that relationship could reignite Quartermain family drama in a way Drew never manages. The bigger question is whether AJ and Jason could finally bury the hatchet, or at least sharpen it together against Drew. But let's not fool ourselves. History shows AJ would inevitably be written as the town's scapegoat once again. Unless the writers were finally willing to let him triumph over Sonny and claim his rightful role at ELQ, perhaps it's better his memory remains intact rather than dragged back through the mud. Then there's Lorenzo Alcazar, the mobster whose mere name evokes a time when Sonny actually had adversaries worth fearing. Bringing him back would restore a balance the show desperately lacks. At present, the so-called mob wars feel more like playground squabbles. Alcazar's return would give Jason and Sonny a genuine threat instead of recycled thugs of the week. But beyond those three, resurrection fatigue sets in. The once shocking twist of a character rising from the dead has been done so many times that no one bothers mourning anymore. Jason has returned so often, he may as well come with a respawn timer. Drew's back from the grave arc was so poorly executed that fans are still debating whether the character we see now is Drew, Shiloh, or just a bad rewrite with brain damage. Unless the writers explain his cartoonish personality shift, better to send him back to the afterlife permanently. Other names get tossed around. Emily Quartermain, Georgie Jones, even Stefan Cassadine, but each comes with baggage. Emily's return would feel cruel unless handled with surgical precision. Georgie might restore some heart to Maxie's story, but would Spinelli simply fall back into old patterns? Stefan's resurrection might at least give Laura something resembling a storyline, now that Kevin has vanished into thin air. As for AJ, fans are divided. Some argue Monica could have secretly spirited him away to protect him from Sonny's wrath, reviving him only after her death. It's plausible, but it requires a level of narrative generosity the writers have never granted him. More likely, AJ would be dragged back just to be humiliated again. And frankly, he deserves better in death than another round of character assassination. Ultimately, the show must decide whether these resurrections serve story or stunt. Characters like Sam and Alcazar could ignite dormant plot lines. Others, like AJ or Morgan, risk undermining the few genuine consequences the show has left. If death means nothing, then neither does life. And at that point, even the most loyal fans may stop caring who rises next. The biggest lie General Hospital tells isn't a plot twist, it's pretending Elizabeth's house is the brownstone. General Hospital once understood that characters don't live in a vacuum. They lived in houses, apartments, and, most memorably, the brownstone. That brick-and-mortar icon of the 90s wasn't just a backdrop, it was a crucible where storylines collided. With 4 apartments under one roof, the brownstone fostered something the show desperately lacks today: community. Imagine the possibilities now. Maxie and her children in Bobby and Tony's old apartment, Lucas taking another, Molly setting up shop, dragging Cody into the orbit by default, and the final unit going to a legacy character like Tommy Hardy, Serena Baldwin, or Annie Donnelly. The setup practically writes itself. Even better, a modern revival could house Elizabeth's son Jake, Emma, and Gio. Teen storylines built on shared walls instead of shared text messages. The complaint, of course, is that Elizabeth supposedly already lives there. Technically, yes. Her current house is canonically Bobby's old brownstone. But let's be honest, the set bears no resemblance to the original. The old brownstone had steps leading to the courtyard, neighbors colliding on the stairs, and a palpable sense of working-class Port Charles. Elizabeth's brownstone is just another generic single-family home with none of the communal tension that once made the space thrive. And that's the real tragedy. General Hospital abandoned spatial awareness. Once upon a time, characters' environments reflected their class, history, and social ties. Now, nearly everyone lives in a mansion, a penthouse, or a random modular set with all the charm of a rental showroom. When Port Charles and Pine Valley were reinvented as bustling metropolises where every character, from 20 to 80, lived like a trust fund baby, the sense of realism vanished. Credit Brian Franz with that stroke of genius, another nail in the coffin of believable storytelling. The nostalgia isn't just for the brownstone itself. The 1990s sets gave viewers a sense of place. Laura's evolving home, the iconic Weber set redressed endlessly, the Ward House, Greystone Manor, and the dreamlike original penthouse. The old hospital, with its circular nurses' station, cafeteria, and ever-busy elevators, felt alive. The current hospital set, though expansive, now looks cavernous and sterile, a shell of its former energy. Meanwhile, practical sets like Sam's apartment have vanished into thin air, their fates never explained. Was it destroyed in an explosion? Forgotten by the writers? Hand-waved away when Dante moved in? The ambiguity underscores a broader issue. The show has stopped caring about grounding its characters in spaces that feel real. The brownstone, if restored, would be more than nostalgia bait. It would anchor younger and mid-tier characters in a believable, community-driven environment. Instead of shoving half the cast into the Quartermain mansion with its ever-multiplying bunk rooms, the brownstone could provide a natural stage for conflict, camaraderie, and class contrast, things General Hospital once excelled at and now sorely lacks. Bring back the brownstone. Not Elizabeth's bland knockoff, not a one-room modular placeholder, but the real thing. Characters need a neighborhood, not a warehouse full of empty penthouses. 3 years undercover, and the writers gave us absolutely nothing. For a man who allegedly spent 3 years working with the FBI, Jason Morgan has remarkably little to show for it. Viewers were told he was deep undercover, infiltrating criminal networks, and yet the storyline has been treated as if it were a witness protection vacation. No hints, no revelations, no lasting consequences, just a yawning narrative gap where character development should be. One intriguing possibility would be that Jason's cover included a fabricated wife or relationship. Imagine the drama of a woman showing up in Port Charles, calling him by his code name, claiming to be his spouse, or, better yet, showing up with a child. Soap logic practically begs for such a reveal. Jason as a girl dad has long been a dangling what-if, ever since the show decided to rob him of raising Scout. Of course, retconning in a secret marriage would be a stretch, given Jason hasn't had an on-screen romance since his brief, ill-fated fling with Britt. That ended not because of chemistry, but because the writers needed to shove him back into Carly's orbit. Still, a few ghosts from his undercover years wouldn't hurt. Every great mob enforcer needs a past mistake ready to bite him. Naturally, fans' imaginations have run wild. The more outlandish pitches involve Alex Devane, yes, Anna's identical twin, producing Jason's secret daughter during his time with the Bureau. Never mind that Alex has a grandchild in college. This is soap opera where women over 70 can give birth with the ease of ordering takeout. Reality's limits don't stop soap writers. They only egg them on. The FBI years also carried dangling plot threads. Jason was supposedly hunting Brennan Valentine, but was clearly intended as Jagger's tool against Sonny. The show has all but forgotten Karen, who once adored Jason Quartermain while Jagger burned with jealousy. Reviving her, perhaps with a recognizable recast, would be a cleaner way of giving Jason a daughter, without inventing some octogenarian miracle pregnancy. Even actor Steve Burton has hinted that Jason might have had a casual romance while undercover, though with Britt back in the picture, that window seems to have closed. Still, soap tradition insists on skeletons tumbling out of closets, so an off-screen entanglement producing a child remains very much on the table. And, of course, it would almost certainly be a daughter, because soaps love nothing more than the narrative shorthand of girls soften fathers. But does Jason really need another child he won't raise? The man already has a baseball team of neglected offspring. Adding one more to the roster would highlight his absentee dad problem rather than fix it. What Jason actually needs is something radical for his character: stability, domesticity, perhaps even a healthy romance with Britt. Naturally, that would also be out of character for both parties, and thus exactly the kind of scandal that Port Charles thrives on. Meanwhile, Drew racks up romances like Airline Miles, Anna has Valentine, even Cody managed a couple of kisses with Sasha. Jason? 1 kiss in 3 years. Not exactly mob kingpin energy. As for Britt, she's often described as a Carly-light version of Elizabeth. Fiery like Carly, but with Elizabeth's medical credentials. The problem is, Elizabeth once betrayed Jason by fingering him for Franco's murder, while Carly engineered one of his near-death experiences. Britt, at least, actually saved his life. Perhaps the show should lean into that. The larger point is this: Jason's FBI years remain an empty vault, begging to be cracked open. Whether it's an undercover wife, a forgotten flame, or a child he never knew, the story needs something. Otherwise, those 3 years will remain nothing more than a lazy excuse to bench a character who thrives only when his past comes back to haunt him.